You ask and you shall receive. So many of you who watch my channel have reached out, sent me this story about the National Association of Realtors lawsuit, and have asked me to comment on it even before the verdict came out. A lot of people were asking me what I think about it, and I've been telling people in the comments or whenever they write me an email about it that I will discuss it when there's a verdict, and lo and behold, we have a verdict. Now obviously this is probably not the first video you've seen on this, but of course I'm going to give you my take on things along with what's actually happening. Now, as you can tell by the title, this is my first impression of how I think all this is going to go down, that sellers don't want to pay people and realtors are probably going to quit en masse because of this. And I'll explain later on why that actually might hurt the industry and people that are looking to buy or sell a home. But first of all, let's talk about what actually happened. Back in 2019, there was a lawsuit filed by a group of home sellers against National Association of Realtors, as well as a couple of real estate companies. And the lawsuit was over these real estate companies, along with the National Association of Realtors, basically teaming up to price fix fees for selling a home, so that way it's artificially more expensive to sell than it should be. And so after the court case just happened, over the past couple of weeks, the ruling finally came in the favor of the home sellers, and they were awarded $1.8 billion with a B in damages on Tuesday this week. And the other companies that are going to have to pay up besides the National Association of Realtors are Keller Williams and Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company. Now the main argument here with this court case is surrounding the amount of commission that home sellers pay to the buyer's agent. And the buyer's agent is the real estate agent that works with you, the buyer, and the seller's agent is the agent that has the listing and represents the seller. And part of the problem is the fee or the commission being offered to the buyer's agent was not public information or knowledge of the buyer, which in the end could steer a buyer's agent into showing some properties and not others to potential buyers, because say for example the standard for many years has been 6% commission, okay, and then it gets split in half, 3% for the buyer's agent, 3% for the seller's agent. Here we have a house, waterfront, listed for sale for $5.4 million, and they actually tried selling this house back in 2021. Look at these listing shenanigans. They actually listed it for sale for $4.9 million November of 2021, raised the price by a whole $1 million to $5.9 million, and then started lowering the price from there into 2022. Couldn't find a buyer, and now they're trying again in 2023. They listed this place ever since September for $5.4 million once again. And check this out. The property tax bill here is barely $10,000 per year, which is only about $1,000 more per year than I'm gonna have to pay for a property that's worth a tenth of what this place is. Boy, is it fun to be a young millennial or Gen Z buyer today. So say for example this house we just looked at across the street is offering a 3% commission to the buyer's agent, and then one a few doors down is only offering a 2 or 2.5% commission. The buyer's agent is going to be much more incentivized to show that first home, not really the second one, because they will make more money if the buyer buys that first home. Now I don't really see the collusion part in this, that the lawsuit claims this whole situation allows these companies to drive up commissions and fees that sellers have to pay, because that's always something that's been negotiable between the seller's agent and the seller. It's not like there is actually one fixed price that needs to be agreed on. It's always been, 6% for all these years has kind of been like the standard. And then I've seen agents collect as low as 4%, 2% for themselves and 2% for the buyer's agent. So it kind of varies. But according to the story, it costs about 2 to 3 times as much to sell a house in the US as it does in other industrialized companies. And this is due to the fact that the standard commission rate is 6%. But like I said, that's always been negotiable. That's never been set in stone. Now, one spokesperson for the realtor side of things said that today's decision means that buyers will face even more obstacles in an already challenging real estate market. and sellers will have a harder time realizing the value of their homes. It could also force home buyers to forego professional help during what is likely the most complex and consequential financial transaction they'll make in their lifetime. Now, I actually agree with this statement, and I'll get into why a little bit later on, so that way you guys can understand the dynamics at play here. And one other part of the argument here is that at the very moment, under this current system, buyer's agents who don't really do a good job, or who are lazy, or aren't really the best real estate agents, essentially are being subsidized and are being allowed to make this 3% commission off the sale, even though they're not bringing much value to the deal. And that's also part of the argument of why they want this to go away. And they use the argument that whether or not the buyer's agent does a good job, they get that 3% fee, but the customer might not have got that 3% in value worth of service. So essentially, what they want done, now that this lawsuit has been won by the home sellers, is they don't want home sellers from this point forward to be forced to pay the buyer's agent's commission. So that would drop the standard commission from 6% down to 3% tops, because even from there, the seller's agent might negotiate an even lower commission on their part, So they could essentially cut in half what it would cost to sell a home. Great for sellers, right? Well, let's dive into this. And before we do, one important thing to note is this does not change everything overnight, okay? Just because this court case was won by the home sellers, it doesn't mean that from this day moving forward, that home sellers will never pay a buyer's agent again, because that's up for negotiation at this point. Because now that the National Association of Realtors has lost this lawsuit, that part from now on will be up for negotiation, whereas before it wasn't, because if you wanted to list your house on the MLS, you would have to offer compensation to the buyer's agent in order to have your property in the MLS to begin with. That's MLS rules, and now that's something that's probably going to change. And also, the amount of money being paid to the buyer's agent, if there is any being offered, is supposed to be disclosed from now on. But it doesn't mean that sellers will never pay a buyer's agent again, just to make sure that that's clear. And one other thing that's really not clear is who is getting this $1.8 billion. I read about 4 different stories regarding this whole thing, and nowhere does it say who all this $1.8 billion is going to. Now, obviously, this was a class action lawsuit, and the money will be split against some of the people who filed this lawsuit, but is it going to go to hundreds or thousands of other home sellers that sold a house between 2015 and now? I have no idea. I can't find any info on that, but it'll be interesting to find out what's going to happen to that $1.8 billion. And by the way, the judge could even rule it up to being $5 billion due to the antitrust laws that were supposedly broken here. So one thing this is going to do, besides lower the commission being offered on any given home sale, is that one big problem that probably a lot of people wouldn't see coming from this is it's no longer going to give buyer's agents an incentive to show other agents' listings if this becomes the standard. And the reason why is because if the seller's not offering any compensation to them, why would I want to sell your house? Makes sense, right? I'm not going to get paid. So the only way that these deals would work moving forward is if the buyer would be willing to pay their real estate agent representing them directly. But the problem is a couple of things. Number one, this has never really been the case here in the US. So this is going to be a huge shift for buyers to deal with that, essentially. The other thing is buyers are already being pushed to the max, especially right now when you're talking about buying homes at today's prices and interest rates, and to have to fork over extra money to pay their realtor as well might be a deal breaker for them. They might not be able to afford to do that. And that's where it comes back to what this guy said earlier. This could essentially make it even more difficult for buyers to buy under these new conditions, and could force buyers to go it alone. They might have to start looking at listings, write up their own offers, and all these things themselves, or maybe hire an attorney to deal with that if they don't want to hire a buyer's agent. And the other thing is, people are saying, well, this might lower the price of houses a little bit then, because sellers wouldn't have to pay such a giant commission. Give me a break, guys. Here we have another hot potato property listed at a cool $3.1 million, and it is a double flip, and somehow somebody was able to lose money in April of 2022. How that's even possible, I don't know. But they sold it in April of 2022 for $1.5 million, and then had to panic sell it for $1.25 million in November of that same year, and now this person is trying to ask more than double what they paid for the property. I don't think it's going to happen. And their property tax bill is about $16,000 per year. Do you really think a seller putting their house on the market today is going to ask less money than what the comps are showing just because they don't have to pay their agent as much? Hell no. They're just going to take that extra money that they don't have to pay the agent and stick it in their pocket. But where does that leave the buyers in all of this then? Well, it leaves them royally screwed, kind of, because the second big dynamic that this changes about the housing market is buyers have to pay their agents from now on. It opens up a whole new can of worms. Well, how much should we pay them? Should it be a percentage-based commission based on the sale? Should it be a flat fee from now on? There's no standard or precedent set for this as of right now. Also, it means for buyers, you're going to be stuck with one agent from now on. And it seems like a lot of buyers don't like that, because in my experience, when I was working full-time as a real estate agent, one of the worst things about being a real estate agent, guys, in case you don't know, is you think you have a client, and the next thing you know, they ditch you for another realtor because, oh, my brother-in-law just got their real estate license, or my friend just got his real estate license, so I'm going to use him now. Okay, so you can just flush down the toilet the last 2 months that we were looking at houses together, because they're just going to jump ship and go with somebody else. And as the buyer's agent in that situation, you get completely screwed. You don't make a commission, and you lose the client. But if buyers are going to be forced to pay their realtors directly from now on, they won't be able to do that anymore. They won't be able to jump ship and just use whoever they want in the middle of looking for a house, because they already have a contract signed with their current buyer's agent. Because another thing a lot of people don't know about the real estate industry, there actually is a contract for becoming an exclusive buyer's agent. Well, what does that mean? It means you can require your buyer to sign this contract if they want to work with you. And what it means is, if they sign this contract, that they're not allowed to work with any other agents to find and buy the house. And if they end up doing that, then you have a claim to the commission anyways, even if you're not the one who sells them the house. And in the past, most of the time, nobody would want to sign a contract like this because it was a free-for-all. Buyer's agents would do anything to lure clients away and steal clients, just like, oh, my brother-in-law just got the license, so I'm going to use them instead. But now, if buyers are going to be forced to pay their realtors directly, most likely every buyer moving forward will have to sign one of these contracts to work with any buyer's agent, which in my opinion is the way it always should have been, because that way it gives the buyer's agent some security, but it also puts the buyers in a position where if they don't like their realtor, then they're stuck paying them. They're stuck using them even if they don't like them, which kind of sucks. But that's also why you should interview a few different buyer's agents before choosing one, especially now moving forward if this becomes the standard. And another important thing to note here is it's not like this is a brand new concept where clients will have to pay their buyer's agent directly. Like I've heard a lot of people move down here from New York, and a lot of people have told me that up there, that when you want to find a rental in New York City, for example, that you will pay your realtor the fee. Okay, you'll pay them a commission for finding you that rental. So this is a pretty common practice in other places that's been going on for a long time, but not really in the for sale market. Here we have a legacy property that hasn't been sold since 1990. Now they're listed at about $3.1 million, same price as the other house, and the last time it sold for $156,000 in 1990. Let that one sink in for a little while. And once again, this property's property tax bill is lower than mine at $5,300 per year, even though the house is supposedly worth $3 million. And as crazy as this might sound, when I look at these properties and see that it's $3 million for this old house like this, it honestly makes California look like a pretty good value, guys. A lot of houses over there are cheaper than this, and probably nicer too. But hey, that's just my opinion from what I saw in my summer road trip. And it's just an interesting observation now coming back to Miami, seeing what people are asking for these crazy old houses. So one big problem from all of this is, number one, it's not going to make housing any more affordable for buyers. In fact, it's going to make it more expensive for buyers because, like I said before, sellers are not going to be lowering the price of the house just because they don't have to pay the full commission anymore. They're just going to pocket that difference. So if it's on the buyers to pay, it's going to cost them even more money. They already have to come up with the down payment, the closing costs, and now, in addition to that, they're going to have to pay their realtor. And they're already talking about how if the banks and the lenders are going to let buyers roll this payment essentially into what they borrow for the mortgage, and that's unclear at the moment, but I'm willing to bet that they probably will, because the lenders aren't going to want to lose business on this either. So they're probably going to come up with a new incentive or home buyer credit for paying the commission for the buyer's agent. But like I said, that's going to cost buyers more money. And we've already seen the housing market plummet in terms of home buyer demand, mortgage applications, and the amount of closed and pending home sales has already fallen off a cliff. And this is probably just going to make it worse. And one thing that might not be obvious for people, but this is why the sellers have always traditionally paid the commission. It's because the sellers are going to be the ones walking away with the biggest gain, okay? They sell a property, typically going to walk away with at least a six-figure amount in their pocket, in many cases, at least, especially today, and they have that money, they have that equity or the ability to pay, whereas the buyer usually doesn't. And in many cases in the past, like when I've taken a listing, a lot of sellers will artificially increase the price in order to compensate for paying the real estate agent's commission. So what does that do? It does a couple of things. The first thing it does is it artificially raises home prices in the surrounding area because you have comps that close at this price, and then because they already have those houses that close at this price, this raises the value for other homes in the neighborhood. But that price that house sold for was only that price because the seller didn't want to pay the real estate agent out of pocket. So how something like this might look is like, say you have a $300,000 house, okay, and the commission on that would be about $18,000 if it's a 6% commission. Well, instead, the seller will say, no, sell my house for $325 or $320, and then, you'll get your commission, and I essentially didn't have to pay out of pocket. Technically, the seller still pays, but the home price was raised artificially in order to pay the realtor's commission, okay? And what I'm trying to say here is, you think sellers today are going to stop wanting to list that house for $325? No. The sellers are going to be the ones that are going to walk away with that difference because the comps in the area support it. And to make matters even worse for buyers, even though it's not going to make houses cheaper for them, they're going to have to decide whether or not they want to pay an agent directly or they want to go it alone and go through the entire home buying process by themselves with no agent, or if they can't afford to actually hire someone, then be forced to take on more debt if the mortgage lenders start letting people roll the fee into their loan. So instead of needing a $300,000 loan, now I need a $315,000 loan or a $310,000 loan. So I have to pay more interest and go into further debt to pay somebody to help me. So I don't see really in any way how this helps buyers at all. In fact, it probably is going to hurt a lot of buyers, especially in their wallet. But on the agent side of things, I see a couple of things happening. Number one, I see a lot of real estate agents quitting in the near term, especially if a lot of sellers decide not to want to pay anymore and buyers can't pay. They literally can't right now because they literally can't even afford to buy the house they're trying to buy. So I think you're going to see a lot of real estate agents all of a sudden quit, which I'm not saying would be a bad thing because the industry is already oversaturated as it is. There's too many realtors right now, and probably going to see a lot of them quit anyways, even before this, because business is in the tank. But in the long run, this might actually benefit buyers agents because it might give them more of a solid footing. It might give them a guarantee that you're working for a commission rather than just shooting in the dark, because the way it was before, you would work with a buyer and then they say, oh no, my brother-in-law just got their license, so I'm going to work with them now, and then they get to capitalize on all your hard work and buy the house with them after just looking at a couple places because they've already seen a dozen of them. So that's always sucked, and will actually give whoever remains in the business and wants to work as a buyer's agent more stability and more of a guaranteed income in the future. And now that buyers won't be guaranteed a commission on any given house that they sell, if a lot of sellers don't want to pay, then I think it's also going to force a lot of home buyers to pay their real estate agents up front, at least a portion of the fee, because who's going to want to work for free, guys? Like, I put myself in this position. Like, if I was still working as a buyer's agent out there, why on earth would I take on a client for free and potentially sell them a house where I also won't get paid? So now what, we're working as a charity? No, right? Probably most agents are going to start requiring at least a percentage of the fee paid up front. So once that happens, the buyers are going to be essentially married to that real estate agent moving forward, unless they're happy to lose that fee. The way I would think this would be fair is, let's say the average real estate commission would be $10,000, okay? I would think it'd be fair to collect at least $2,000 of that up front straight from the buyer, and you get to keep that regardless of whether or not they buy a house, okay? That's simple, because your time is not worthless and you're spending time with people, helping them find a place, and sometimes people decide not to buy. And that was always a problem in the past. Even if they don't have a brother-in-law real estate agent, sometimes people change their mind. Life happens and they don't buy. I've had that happen so many times, guys. I would have made a fortune in real estate if every single person I worked with throughout the years actually bought something. The problem is, like, 80% of them don't. Like I said, this could actually help buyer's agents in the long run and give them more stability in their career. And before sellers think that they're just getting away with murder and they're not going to have to pay anybody anymore, this can also backfire. And the way I see this potentially backfiring is, in the short term, it's going to make a lot of buyer's agents not want to show your listing, okay? And this is coming at a time when home buyer traffic is already down, mortgage applications are down, and closed sales are down. So it's going to make it even harder for you to sell your house in the near term until this whole mess gets sorted out and like a new status quo becomes the norm. And so what this might actually do is it could actually incentivize home sellers to continue offering compensation to buyer's agents moving forward to ensure a steady flow of home buyer traffic into their home. Because the last thing you want, if you're really serious about trying to sell your house, is no foot traffic and no showings. So I'm not really sure that home sellers are going to see the results from this that they were hoping to. It might just make it even tougher for them to sell their houses over the next couple of years until things kind of settle down with this and a new normal is established on how people are going to get paid. And a couple other things I noticed that this story doesn't address at all, or this lawsuit for that matter, is it doesn't address, number one, what happens when you're the seller's agent and you have your own buyer that comes in and buys the house. Well, typically in states where that's legal, like here in Florida, there's many places where that's allowed, where you can represent both the buyer and the seller. You make double the commission. Is that still going to be the case? I don't know. Or is it going to force the seller's agent to now become the buyer's agent as well and become what we call in Florida here a transaction broker, is the legal term for that, and work both sides of the deal? And are they going to charge the buyer, or is the seller going to pay? Because you started off representing the seller first. That's a big unknown. The other thing that's an unknown is maybe this won't affect as many real estate agents, but it will affect a lot of people looking for rentals, right? Because rentals also operate under this same scenario, where you have the landlord hires a real estate agent to list the property for rent, and the landlord is offering a commission to both the tenant's agent and the listing agent. So is this going to change that dynamic as well? Because if it does, it's not only going to hurt home buyers, it's also going to hurt tenants, because if tenants have to start paying their realtors like they do in New York City, for example, this can really flip things on its head, because it's going to make it a lot more difficult for tenants to find a place to rent. So overall, like, my opinion is, I think that this whole lawsuit is probably going to create more problems than it solves. Mainly because, like I said earlier, the commission has always been negotiable, guys. Like, you can negotiate it down to whatever you want. It's always been that way. There's really no minimum. So was it really necessary to go through this massive lawsuit to change this? I don't think so. Probably not. But now that it has happened, the Realtor Association says that they're going to appeal it and try to fight this. Of course they are. Who knows whether or not they're going to win. But to me, it's like, okay, you solved one problem, making it so sellers don't have to pay buyer's agents anymore. But you created a whole new set of problems, not just one problem of how are buyer's agents going to get paid? How much more are buyers going to have to fork over to buy homes? How is this going to affect the rental market and tenants looking to rent a place? Is there going to be as much foot traffic coming through your listing? These are all problems I foresee coming down the line from this. But I do think in the end it's all going to work itself out, whether it gets appealed and the NAR wins, or if it stays under its current verdict and stays the way it is. I don't think it really matters, because in the end it will end up sorting itself out. And one thing that's for sure, guys, is I know that people aren't going to work for free, so someone's going to end up paying for the services in the end. Who it's going to be and how much, I don't know. And one last thing I wanted to talk about with this that just came to my mind is, for a long time we've had these services out there, these limited service real estate companies, where all they do is you pay the brokerage company a flat fee of like $400 or $500, something like that, okay? And they'll list your house on the MLS. But part of that agreement is that you still have to pay the buyer's agent, guys. So what's going to happen to all those real estate companies? They're going to go out of business now? Because if all those home sellers don't want to pay the buyer's agent and they're only paying their seller's agent a flat fee just to list the property online, then they're not going to be able to have their listings appear on the MLS, number one. And two, a lot of these companies might go bust. So once again, I think it creates more problems than it solves, like most lawsuits usually do. But if you are a home seller out there right now and you say you're going to be listing your house, first of all, feel free to use my service in the description. I can get you a real estate agent in your neighborhood completely for free. But besides that, I would like to know from you guys, like, if you sign a new listing agreement with a realtor right now and you decide you don't want to pay the buyer's agent's commission, let me know how it goes. Let me know if you're still able to sell the house or if people aren't showing up. I'm really curious to know how things are going to work as soon as people start offering these sort of deals out there where the house is for sale, but you're not offering a commission to the buyer's agent. So, you know, who's left to come look at it? You know, the buyers are going to have to show up on their own. And let me know, guys. Let me know how it works out. I'm curious. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next one to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here. And I'll see you in the next one.